Hi everybody. Today we are going to talk about Uncle Tupelo, a topic that I am not shy about bringing up, and one that I have done many times, a few times on these videos, many times if you know me, because I've been a champion of their music for a long time. I found out a few days ago that this week marks the 30th anniversary of their debut, No Depression, which was titled after the Carter family song, No Depression in Heaven. I don't know if it's a traditional song that the Carter family recorded or if they wrote the track. I thought it was A.P. Carter who wrote that track. Can't recall, but it's astounding to me that it has been 3 full decades. So I wanted to do this video to talk about how I discovered Uncle Tupelo, why they are the most important band in my musical life, and how 30 years later they are still influencing tons of new bands and artists, and sort of just they breathe within almost everything that I listen to. If you look at the records behind me, from the folks who came before Uncle Tupelo, so folks like Graham Parsons, Emmylou Harris, Lucinda Williams, through to the bands that they have influenced, folks like Jason Isbell, the Drive-By Truckers, the Old 97s, a ton of acts, the Jayhawks. The Jayhawks actually preceded Uncle Tupelo, and Jeff Tweedy from Uncle Tupelo has done some sort of side work with Gary Loris and Mark Perlman in the band Golden Smog. But that's a tough one to say who influenced who there, if either influenced either at all. I think the first Jayhawks record was in 1986, Bunkhouse, the one that just got reissued a couple of years ago. And then Blue Earth was 89, so Uncle Tupelo was 1990. So who knows if there's any influence there at all between the two, but certainly a similar sound. And they're both, Uncle Tupelo's not around anymore, but the Jayhawks are, as well as all the acts that came out of Uncle Tupelo are still sort of thriving. So 30 years since the release of this. Maybe I get better positioned here. Uncle Tupelo's No Depression, a brilliant debut. It was on Rockville Records, indie label in New York. Jay Farrar, Jeff Tweedy, and Mike Heidorn. Was produced, who was it? Sean Slade, I think? Yeah, Sean Slade and Paul Colderay. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. But this is what started it all, and this started it all for me. Again, no band has had a bigger impact on my life than Uncle Tupelo. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about their records. I did not, dog's coming over to hang out. I did not know Uncle Tupelo when they were active. So I'll make this story short because I've told it to many people over the years, but it was 1994, I think it was early 94, February. I was in college up in Boston, and I was going to see, I think it was Big Head Todd and the Monsters, who were playing at our school on a given night. A friend of mine had a friend of his in town from Maine, and that evening, the evening that we were going to see Big Head Todd, this gentleman, his name was Andrew, asked me if I would like an extra ticket to see a band that he was seeing at the Paradise in Boston. I turned it down because I'd never heard of the band. You can probably guess where this is going. And we went and saw Big Head Todd. I think we stayed for a song and then left and went to a bar and just did what do when you're 20 years old and in college, and you're in a group of guys and girls that party a little bit. Probably went to a bar and then stayed up late into the night. And I remember the following day, I asked Andrew how the show was, and he said it was great. And he asked me if I would like to hear the band. Remember, this is pre-digital, so he went out to his car and got a copy of this record, Uncle Tupelo's last record, and what I consider to be their best, although I think they are all perfect records, but this is Anodyne, their one major label release, and this is when the band expanded to a 5-piece as opposed to a 3-piece. And he came in, put a CD in the 6-disc changer I think we had in my buddy Brian's apartment. Brian was sitting across from me. I've mentioned him a lot on these videos. He has turned me on to more music. Him and the Archivist have probably turned me on to more music than anyone else I know outside of my parents. But Brian was sitting across from me. Andrew went straight to song 6 and played New Madrid. And I don't ever recall having that feeling with new music. This sort of being absolutely blown away by a sound. It reminded me of nothing else, but it had bits of Neil Young, Hank Williams, who I didn't know really well at the time, but sort of just that old country sound that I heard a little bit as a kid, Bob Dylan, but there was also sort of an angst to the band that reminded me of punk music, not so much on Anodyne, but their earlier records. So that's who we saw, Uncle Tupelo. I had a free ticket. They are now the most important band of my lifetime, and I turned it down for a band that I went and saw one song of. So that afternoon, Brian and I hopped in his truck, drove down to, I think we went to Newberry Comics first, and if I remember correctly, they didn't have any of the Uncle Tupelo records, so we went to Tower Records, and they did. I think we both got Anodyne. I then had to mail order the first 3. So No Depression, the Birthday album, 30 Years, Uncle Tupelo, Still Feel Gone, which followed No Depression, came out a year later, 1991. My favorite Uncle Tupelo record. I think Anodyne's the best, but this is my favorite. When I do my top 10,000 records of all time, this will be right near the top. And then, of course, their third record, which is their most unique. They're very stripped down with a bunch of traditional songs, produced by Peter Buck from REM, March 16th, 20th, 1992. Came out in 92, so they put out 4 records in 4 years, and they're all perfect. So those 3, I had to, as I was getting to, I had to mail order. I mail ordered from Ramsey Book and Records in New Jersey. It took about 2 or 3 weeks to arrive, maybe longer. I remember I would call a couple times a week to check in to see if those CDs arrived. And one day they did. And I remember I drove down in my beat up Mazda 626, my first car, drove to Ramsey Book and Records, and listened to those 3 records all summer of 1994. And it was, I will never forget, just similar to when I heard New Madrid, the feeling I had when I heard Gun, the first song on Still Feel Gone, which is the first non-Anodyne record that I played when I got into my car. I can remember driving up and down Route 17 in New Jersey all summer long, sometimes with friends in the car, sometimes solo, sometimes we go to the shore, and all I would talk about was Uncle Tupelo, with my friends, with family, with neighbors, with people at the pizza shop. It was just, I could not believe that this band existed and that I had never heard of them prior. And when I say that they were the most important band or most important act in my life, that is not hyperbole. I mean, not that anybody really cares who my personal favorite band of all time is, outside of like 2 of my friends, but I was raised on Springsteen, the Everly Brothers, Bob Dylan, Stones, the Beatles, some Sam Cooke, Otis Redding. This is stuff that my mother and father, who were separated or divorced, would play in the house. My dad was more on the rock side, Springsteen, some Bob Seger. He went pretty deep on the rock and roll side, and my mom was more oldies, Everly's, just a lot of that old sound. And this, Uncle Tupelo sort of felt like what was next to come from that sound. So those acts played a huge role in me loving music early on in my life. Simon and Garfunkel is another one. When I saw their concert in Central Park at like the age of 7, it floored me. I remember, my mom loves this story. I remember I was watching the USA for Africa fundraiser. I think that was in 1982, 4. And I was so moved by the music, and I don't even remember who was performing at that. But I was so moved by it that I asked my mother if she would donate $25 to get me a t-shirt. And my mom at the time did not have a lot of money. And I was so persistent because I was so moved by the music as well as the imagery of what they were fundraising for that she did it. I'll never forget her and I getting on the phone together and making that call. And I had that t-shirt until maybe 5-10 years ago. My sister had it and lost it. And if she's watching, you don't owe me $25, but you owe me a cool t-shirt. Maybe? I'm kidding. But those musical moments as a kid are very profound to me. We saw Fleetwood Mac in 1980. It's one of the first shows I remember. My dad said that I saw Elton John in Central Park, and not on my own. I was 3 with him and my stepmother, I believe, in 77 or 78. No recollection of that, but I do remember Fleetwood Mac. Men at Work opened. It was in 81, so I was 7, and that was at the Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. But Uncle Tupelo, whose 4 proper records I just showed you all. They actually have 2 more on vinyl that are worth showing. This one is pretty hard to find. I think Rockville they did put this out. So this is the double album of Still Feel Gone on March 16th. It may not be hard to find, I don't know. It was hard to find when I got it. Looks like there was a 7-inch or something inside the plastic from it. So there it is. Yeah, this is actually the plastic from when I bought it. Look at that, I don't know if you could see it. Yeah, you can. This is from Newberry Comics in Boston, I think. The date on this is April 18th, 1997. It was $15. Was I in Boston then? No, so it wasn't in Boston. I don't remember where I bought this. Could have been Ramsey Broken Records. So that is one of their other records, and then they put out an anthology, which great cover of their sort of best tracks with a bunch of alternate takes as well. Let's see, I don't even remember what this looks like. Oh wow, a lot going on in there. So this is sort of their greatest hits, so to speak. And that is Uncle Tupelo. So after discovering them, I went so far into their influences and the bands that splintered off of Uncle Tupelo into other bands, and the bands that I thought were influenced by them. So bands like the Old 97s, the Jayhawks. I don't think they were. The Jayhawks actually preceded them, as I noted, as I think I noted. This is my second take on this video, so I can't remember if I brought this up in the previous version, which I stopped after 2 minutes because there was a bunch of street noise, or if it was in this one. So if I mentioned the Jayhawks already, you've heard it. If not, let's move on. Other bands, Marah from Philly, one of my favorites of the late 90s. Very much that sound. Slobberbone. It just goes on and on. so many great bands came out of the spirit of Uncle Tupelo, and a lot of their music was about working class, middle America. One of their most popular, Looking for a Way Out, was Jay and Jeff and Mike trying to get out of Belleville, Illinois. 30 years later, Jeff lives a little bit further. He lives in Chicago. I think Jay lives in St. Louis, and I think Mike still lives in Belleville, last I heard, which was many years ago. But even, when I went back and started to listen to Woody Guthrie and Hank Williams and Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, as well as the punk bands that influenced them, so Black Flag and the Minutemen, and all the sort of others that sort of straddled both sides, like Uncle Tupelo did, like the Modern Lovers, and it all, to me, Uncle Tupelo just opened it all up for me. Prior to that, I said it was in 1994 that I discovered them, so I was 20 years old, and after being sort of groomed on my parents' music, I was listening to classic rock. I was listening to Neil Young and Springsteen and Creedence and the Beatles, the Grateful Dead. I had a little period in '95. I was with Dead, saw them a couple times at Giant Stadium. But Uncle Tupelo, not only did they change my sort of musical world, but I worked in music because of them. I've traveled all over the world to see bands, not that much outside the US, a little bit. I saw Springsteen in Norway twice in 2017, I think. But I've traveled all over the country, a lot of it driving, to see bands that I love, and it all came from that morning. Melodramatic, but true. When I was finishing up college, I wrote to Wilco's label to try and, I wrote to their management, wrote to their label years later, in the early 2000s, to Nonesuch, to try and get a job there. But when I was in college, I wrote to Tony and Margarita Management. I don't even know how. It was when email was just starting. May have been email. I may have mailed him something, trying to get a job at his management company. Tony Margarita recently retired, so congrats to Tony on an incredible career. But the last 20 years of my career has mostly been in music, entertainment, with some tech in there, later in my career, and it's largely because of Uncle Tupelo. I've said that 50 times on this video, so I hope I've gotten that point home. I have yet to mention, because I talk about them ad nauseum, the bands that came out of Uncle Tupelo, and there are a bunch, but the two primary bands are Wilco, Jeff Tweedy's Wilco, which he also took John Stirratt from Uncle Tupelo into Wilco. Ken Coomer was on the first few Wilco records. He was also on Uncle Tupelo. And Sunvolt, of course. Jay Farrar, who released Trace in 1995, the debut Sunvolt record, which, that is a masterpiece. I will never forget my brother and I, we were fanatics about Uncle Tupelo, and I went to visit him in Cincinnati. I flew to Cincinnati, I think it's Covington Cincinnati Airport, it's on the border of Kentucky. It was one of the hottest days I remember ever experiencing in my life. I remember I got out of the plane, I was a smoker then, so I remember I rushed to get out to smoke a cigarette, and I couldn't even smoke my cigarette because it was so scorching hot. I feel like I'm about to start sweating just remembering that day. I remember my brother drove a beat-up Honda Civic that had no air conditioning. I remember we got into his car. I was staying there for 4 or 5 days. I went to visit him. He went to school in Cincinnati. I went to visit him a bunch of times. And I remember we got in the car, and he just had this sort of smirk on his face, and I knew something was up. We were always trading music. Again, it was physical music, mostly cassettes back then. Or was it all cassettes? I don't even know if you could put music on mix CDs yet. But we were exchanging cassette mixes all the time. And I remember he popped in what appeared to be a blank cassette, so it wasn't like a label released record. And how about that? Right now, Tear Stained Eye just came on in the background, and that's what he played. This was not planned. I had a mix of Americana music going. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but he played Tear Stained Eye, a demo version. And I remember we drove straight to a liquor store. We bought tons of beer. He drank Grain Belt, I think that's what it was called, which is very Uncle Tupelo-ish beer. Just sort of that Midwestern feel. And we went back and we listened to these 3 or 4 song demo for 5 straight days, really. I mean, we put other stuff in, but it was all related. And that was my introduction to what would come after Uncle Tupelo, which Sunvolt had the first record with Trace, and then Wilco came out with AM, and then it all I've seen. So if I look back, I've probably seen Wilco 70 times, Sunvolt probably 30 to 40, Uncle Tupelo, as you know, 0. Just real quick, because we're past the 20-minute mark, and I've just shared my life memoir with all of you. 2 post-Uncle Tupelo records by Jay and Jeff that I don't think get enough credit. I've already done my top 15 across all the bands, but Wilco's The Whole Love, which came out in 2011. Love this record. Not a lot of people put this in their top Wilco records. It has One Sunday Morning, which I think may be the best song Jeff Tweedy's ever written. That and Laminated Cat, which is on a Loose Fur record with Jim O'Rourke. I think are his 2 best songs, and he has many. I also want to thank Jeff, if you're watching, which you're definitely not, on the Jeff Tweedy show on Instagram about a week ago-ish. I'm the guy who requested Screen Door when you actually played it. I think I did it in a snarky way, and Sue found it funny, I think, or you did, I don't know, and then you just played it. So thank you for that. You're not watching. And if you are, wow. So The Whole Love, and then Jay Farrar's Sebastopol. His first solo record post first version of Sunvolt. There's the Sunvolt that put out their first 3 records, which is with the Bocrist brothers and Mike Heidorn from Uncle Tupelo, the first Uncle Tupelo drummer. I know it's getting very complicated for people who don't know what's going on here. This is Jay's first solo record, titled after the town of Sebastopol in California, which of course I've gone to many times, mostly just to see what's going on there because Jay Farrar wrote an album about it, or at least it's named after the town. This was reissued, I believe, on Record Store Day in 2016. I should also note that my brother and I once drove from New Jersey to Belleville, Illinois to research Uncle Tupelo, because we were doing some writing about the band. We drove straight from New Jersey to St. Louis, and I will close this video prior to doing my one album I wish more people knew about with this story. We got to St. Louis. We had never been there. We didn't know what was going on. We got a cheap hotel room, and we just walked down from the hotel room. I think we asked somebody what's a cool bar around here. We went in. I was wearing a Sunvolt cap, this black Sunvolt cap that I loved. Wish I still had it. Lost it a few years ago. And we walked into a bar. There was nobody in there. 1 or 2 people plus the bartenders. And we sat down, had a beer. There was a 4 or 5 piece band on stage, and they took a break while my brother and I were sitting at the bar, and one of them walked over and he looked at my hat and he said, "Oh, you know, you're a Sunvolt fan." I said, "I am, huge fan." I didn't say that we're in town to research Jay and Jeff and Mike and everybody associated with the band. And he said, "I'm Jay Farrar's brother." What are the odds of that? I still have a photo of it. I wish I'd taken it out. It's in one of my photo books. I think it was Dade Farrar. He has Dade and Wade. I don't remember which one it is. No, I think John? I don't know. Jay, put it in the comments because I know you're watching. There's no way you're watching. So that will wrap up my Uncle Tupelo story. I could go on forever, as you can see. but they are the Beatles to me. It's not to say I think they're as good as the Beatles, or as important as the Beatles, but the influence they had on my life is can't be overstated. Thanks, Jay, Jeff, Ken, Mike, John, Max. Am I missing anybody? Probably. But you guys, if you ever see this, thanks for all the music you've made over the years. Last record I wish more people knew about is right in the vein of the Uncle Tupelo scene, which is this 6-string drag record, Hi-Hat, which was recently reissued. They signed it. Kenny Roby, the main songwriter, looks like this is, I don't know how many copies I did, but this is number 21. Produced by Steve Earle and Ray Kennedy. It was on E-Squared Records, Steve Earle's label. Just a tremendous record. They're from the Carolinas, I believe. Kenny Roby has a new record coming out soon called The Reservoir, which I can't wait for. I pre-ordered the vinyl, so check out Kenny Roby. I think he's on Bandcamp. But go to your streaming services or do a Google search and find 6-string drag Hi-Hat. Just a fantastic record. This one was fun, a lot of storytelling. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're all doing okay, and I will check back in soon.